The hosts and guests on Everything's Messy podcast are not licensed healthcare professionals. The discussions in our episodes are not personalized medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for medical guidance. Never delay seeking professional medical advice or emergency assistance because of our podcast. We encourage consulting with a healthcare professional before making any significant health changes. By listening to our podcast, you agree to the disclaimer. Thank you for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Hey, welcome to Everything's Messy podcast, where we celebrate the beautiful but messy life experiences that most, if not all, people go through. Get ready to embark on an exciting journey through the raw and unfiltered stories of everyday people. Here, we dive into messy realities of life, from making messy mistakes to triumphs and everything in between. Are you sensing a theme? That's right, it's messy. But this just isn't about the mess. It's about finding strength and resilience in the midst of it all. We'll explore how health, fitness, and wellness play a crucial role in navigating life's twists and very messy turns. And we'll challenge conventional systems, because sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest discoveries. Join us as we embrace the messy, beautiful, and endlessly fascinating stories. Each episode is a testament to the power of our messy journeys and the beauty that emerges from the mess. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee, sparkling water, whatever it may be, and prepare to be inspired. Are you ready? Let's get messy to another episode of Everything's Messy podcast. I am your messy host, Sarah. All right, so this week is a little bit different. It's been an interesting week. The events of the world, the events of my own world, things that are just messy, right? And I do want to say just a little something about the events that occurred last week with Charlie Kirk and the terrible, terrible fate that he met. I pray for his wife. I pray for his children, his parents, his family. I am saddened to see that we can no longer have a dialogue, a conversation, perhaps even an argument that can just be, I agree to disagree. I have said on this podcast before, we're not all ever going to agree on the same things, even pleasant things we have disagreements about. But I will say, no matter what you believe, no matter what you think, no matter your values, we should all of us should understand how precious life is, everybody's life, how precious it is. And nobody should be celebrating in any way that something violent like this happened to somebody who you may or may not disagree with. You know, my whole life, I have had family members and friends, coworkers. Most of the time, even, family members that are aligned with what I believe, we're still going to have disagreements. We have had disagreements. This has been my entire life, but never have I ever hated anybody in my family, in my circle, in my surroundings, at work. I've never hated anyone for what they believe. Again, I come back to agree to disagree. We can be respectful. We can maybe learn something from each other, but hate has no place for any of this. My daughter came to me and asked me, should she be afraid to ever speak of what she believes? I do not want her to grow up in a world where she is afraid to be judged of everything that she says. Now, should we remember, no matter what we're saying, that sometimes what we say, words have consequences? Absolutely. But we should never celebrate or enjoy something bad happening to somebody else because they disagreed with our point of view. And this is something that I feel like all of us need to decide what kind of society we want to live in. Because the one that I want to live in is where I can have a conversation, where I am allowed to voice my opinion, regardless of what's it about. And you can absolutely disagree with it, but you're not going to hate me or wish that bad things happen to me because of it. And that is so vitally important for our existence. I am very saddened to see everything that has transpired. And I will continue to teach my children that it's okay to have a disagreement, that it's okay to not agree with your friends, with your family. I want my children to be able to learn and think and ask questions and not be afraid to do so. That is the most important thing, I think, at least right now it is. So if this offends you in some way, I've been offending people my whole life. It's no different. But I would hate to think that whatever I say causes you to have hate in your heart for me or anybody else. It's ugly. It's just terrible to operate like this. So I just really encourage everybody, on this podcast, we are on a journey for healing. Healing has to start with not hating, not hating. And I just encourage everyone to look at life as precious as it is and value it. Value everyone's life. Everyone deserves, everyone does, a life. And nobody should take that away from anybody else for a disagreement over anything, no matter what it is, no matter what it is. And as I have this podcast, and I'm so grateful for the platform, when we talk about wellness, when we talk about wellness in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirit, that has to come from a place of love. You can't heal any of those three things if you are hating. You can't heal. I've talked about this before. We're looking at our bodies. We want our bodies to look a certain way or be a certain way or do things that they're not ready to do. We can't hate our bodies for it. We have to encourage and think positively and set boundaries and do those things. And it's same mentally. We have a narrative in our head that is negative and it's bashing us and we're being hateful towards ourselves. That's also not going to be helpful. And the same spiritually. We cannot be hateful in recognizing a deity that provides us with love. We can't. I am no scholar. I am no well thinker, I don't have those abilities. I'd like to think I'm a good communicator. I'd like to think that I am able to be very direct with my communication, and I'd like to think my one of my attributes is to be able to articulate a good narrative. I am having trouble this week. A lot of, people might say, you never seem not to have the words. Well, I'm not sure I have the right words this week. But what I do have is a love for everyone, even if they disagree with me. And what I also have is a love for how precious life is. And I think we just need a reminder. We need a reminder to recognize it can change in an instant, and it affects all of us in some way. Those of you that are going through right now the challenges of maybe a loved one being sick, maybe you've come to this podcast because you're trying to find ways to help them, maybe help yourself, maybe, impart some wisdom of maybe, unconventional methods that we've talked about on this podcast. You might be met with, I don't believe that, or I don't think that'll work, or oh, that's too woo-woo. I mean, I can't tell you how many times somebody said, yeah, it's a little woo-woo for me. I'm not going to do that. That's okay. That's okay. I still have respect for you. I still want to help you in a way that I can. It's okay that you don't agree. That's okay. I'm able to come to it of a place of I've already seen one side and I can talk on the other because I've been on both sides. And I think we should strive to do that in anything. Try and see both sides. My mom always said, you can't have absolutes. So what does that leave us? That leaves with us having to agree to disagree in a respectful way. I was born in 1979, 80s and 90s. I remember going to school and even, getting into high school. I don't ever remember this polarization, this separation that we had, and I don't remember I remember debate class. I remember learning history, and there were people that had different views and things like that, but I don't remember hatred for them. And then getting older and getting sort of into politics and wanting to voice my opinions, I definitely was vocal and stubborn. And, I had an opinion, didn't mean it was the right opinion, and it certainly maybe wasn't the most well researched. But I don't remember being hated for it. Maybe I was annoying. I can certainly cop to that. Maybe people, just shut up already. But I don't ever remember feeling hatred in the country or in the world for that reason. Some might say, well, you didn't pay attention close enough. And that's maybe true. That's maybe true. But I also remember being excited to sort of have a debate. Who could sort of challenge me on my way of what I think and who could maybe persuade me to not feel this way? Because I learned that way. I learned, to try to sort of have an argument and see how I could have a gotcha moment with them or how I could try and, persuade them just like I'm sure they wanted to persuade me. But at the end of whatever it was, we were still friends or even with family. Um, you don't walk away or turn your back or say, that's it, or I can't be in your life anymore because we don't agree on something. That's too absolute for me. And I can't subscribe to that. And I certainly could never picture myself turning my back on my family or my friends because we have a different of opinions. That doesn't compute with me. And I know on this podcast, I've said some pretty outrageous things as far as health goes. Again, I feel like not an authority, but I can certainly speak from personal experience of seeing both sides. And all I want to do is bring what I've learned to others that it might be helpful to them. No malice, no agenda, just I want to help. And I feel like some people have that, but I think others have a complete, they want to fight you to the death until you succumb to what they believe. And that's not ever going to be any of us, I don't think. Not in my world. I hope not. I pray that all of us can find our own peace, our own guidance, our own direction with whatever these lessons that we're trying to learn and make sense of. Whatever it brings, I hope there can be some sort of peace in it. But let's try and keep, and I know this is really hard, and it is hard for me too, I'll admit, but if we can try and keep emotions out of it, somehow feeling rejected or offended or whatever the word may be, if, facts aren't feelings, and we shouldn't be fueled in an agenda of feelings because sometimes feelings lie. Sometimes they also dissipate. Sometimes, now I'm not saying you're not entitled to feel the way that you feel, but it shouldn't be what's driving us in order to make big decisions. We should be relying on facts. We should be relying on research. We should be relying on the education that we might be able to get with whatever the issue is. But just because we feel strongly about something, it should not guide us to want to spread hate or anger or my way's better than your way, what I'm doing and for, turning it into name calling or making you feel bad or telling you I no longer can be in your life because you just don't agree with me. Let's come back to the middle of just appreciating each other for our differences, appreciating each other for our what we might be able to contribute, and let's start making it known that we do value life, that there's nothing more important than a life. And then maybe that will open up another way of softness and respect. Like I was saying earlier in my life, I was very aggressive in my points of views. I was very strong. And of course, I thought I was hot shit and I thought I knew everything. And turns out I don't know anything. Um, I wish I could have some of those arguments over again. I might take a different approach because I think at the end of the day, all of us just want to be heard. And sometimes when we're too loud or being annoying or aggressive, people don't hear us. They just see the behavior. And so if we can just make it a little softer, which is, I've been trying to be. Sometimes I think it's just built in me to be extremely stubborn. That might be a lot of us. But at least I can have self-awareness and recognize and be able to go into my head and say, okay, what's the bigger picture here? Is it really, you know, trying to win? Is winning, as Charlie Sheen would say, is that what it's all about? Or is it understanding? And I think now, as I've gotten older, I think it's understanding and even agreeing to not understand. Okay, I may not understand where you're coming from or what you're saying, but I can be respectful. I can be respectful. I can respect a human life. Doesn't mean that I'm going to let you walk all over me. It doesn't mean that I'm going to let you get away with hurting me or my family or my friends or anything like that. But if we could all move towards that goal, if we could all try and be a little more civil, I think it might make some difference. But again, what do I know? I don't seem to know very much these days. So as I close with just those thoughts, please just remember life is precious. Life is amazingly beautiful, but it's also sad and tragic. But we should be doing our best to bring joy where we can. And we praise God for our life. We thank Him. And we just hope that we can come together somehow. So, moving on, I'd like to talk a little bit about the the hot button issue going around within the wellness community right now, and that is the seems to be abundant amount of labels that people want to use with, all the way from little things like carnivore to vegan to, chronic illnesses that they might suffer from to describing themselves with OCD or ADHD or all these things. And I just want to talk really quick about labels and what labels represent. And sometimes it is helpful to have a label because then you can be educated on that and have understanding and you can maybe make different decisions for yourself. But sometimes they can be hurtful. Sometimes they become our whole identity and we forget actually we're living in this box that we've created ourselves because we've slapped this label on us. And I think, again, sometimes it can be important to have it so then maybe what you should do or shouldn't do. Like, for example, I'll just use the label as, gluten sensitive or, celiac disease, can't have gluten. So that's a way in which you need to live so you can have, gut stability and not have to worry about those things. But if you've noticed, and I'm absolutely guilty of it too, once you put that label on yourself, then you're constantly looking at every label and everything around you of, is it gluten? Can I eat it? Is it for me? And it becomes this sort of identity of it's shaping what I need to be. And I know I'm having a hard time kind of putting the words together, But I'm using it as an example to say labels can be helpful, but they can also be our detriment. They also become our identity and sometimes not in a good way. And then sometimes we use those labels as crutches or as excuses or as ways to possibly get away with things or do different things or think we need special attention. And we are a family of labels. We carry many of them, a lot of them, spectrum related, a lot of them, ADHD, OCD. We carry a lot of labels. But I noticed when my kids started talking about how they saw themselves, I noticed that was always the first one in what they thought of themselves. And while it can absolutely explain some behavior or different ways that someone might learn or different needs that are needed to be there so they can kind of have information delivered to them, it becomes how they see themselves. And that's okay. I want them to advocate for themselves and I want them to stand up for themselves and I want them to be able to say, I need this in order to understand the world around me. That's okay. I want them to say that. But I also want them to describe themselves as someone who loves to write, someone who loves to read or draw, someone who loves to play volleyball, somebody who loves to play, you know, video games or does wrestling or plays golf or all of these different things. You are made up of so much more. And if you just put yourself in a box and stand by it, or rather, you know, live by it, we're missing all of the other things. And so again, I don't say this to say labels are not necessary or nobody should be labeled. They are helpful in a certain way and definitely I again, a family of labels, I understand their need. They have a place. But I think we should also encourage whoever is around you or yourself that you may have a label. Maybe look at your whole person as we talk about in wellness and unconventional methods. We're trying to look at the whole person on how to maybe treat a chronic illness or how we're trying to treat, some boundary issues or discipline. So look at the whole person. One thing can't just define you. We're made up of many things. I have a label of type 1 diabetes, but it's what I have. It's not who I am. And I certainly don't let it define me or decide what I'm going to do. Now, do I have to take extra precautions? Absolutely. Do I need to live my life a certain way and have accommodations in a certain way? Absolutely. You betcha. I'm not speaking against any of that. But I'm not just a T1D. I'm not just a heart attack survivor. I'm not just a wife. So I just implore you to know yourself and all of you and all of the splendor and the wonder that you can bring, and try not to let yourself be in a little box and you have to then act a certain way or be a certain way or do a certain thing. You don't. You don't. And again, someone who's very familiar with bucking any conventional system, I will tell you, you should. You should live with as many different attributes and things that make you you. And you know what? Sometimes that's evolving. Sometimes that changes. Sometimes depending on your age, you like one thing, and when you grow up, you're something else. I'll say this. It's like, this is the example I like to use, and I used to hate it, and I still do. But kids in kindergarten, when my kids were in kindergarten, they would ask, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then they all of a sudden have to take on this persona of what they identified with and what they wanted to be. Doctor, lawyer, veterinarian, whatever it was. But then that sort of shaped their life and their desires of going towards that. One, how do we know that they might have been a ballerina or a chef or any other thing, but they were meant to decide in kindergarten what they were going to be for the rest of their life? And I did not like that at all. And I didn't quite understand then why I didn't like it. I just knew they shouldn't have to not only decide, but just to only think that they could only be one thing. So as I, read some parenting books and some, how to shape your kid's mind, or, there was one that was like the untrained child or different things like that I read. One of the questions that seemed to be the better way to replace it was, how do you want to help the world when you grow up? And that's a whole different question, or what problems of the world do you want to solve when you grow up? That's a whole different question. And it should make people think that, first of all, you don't have to have it all figured out. You can have likes and dislikes and change, and that's okay. One day you want to be a doctor, next day you want to be a lawyer, then maybe you want to be both. That's okay. But having to have it figured out when we should just be able to let, I don't want to sound, too crazy for you guys and say, let go where the wind blows you, but you shouldn't have to pick in kindergarten what the rest of your life is going to look like. And now most of us know, we say, we're going to be a rock star. We know we grow up and that's not reality for most of us. And that's, we figure it out, reality sets in. But I think if we could train our brain originally to start looking at the world, not inside, but from the outside, and be like, what problems can I solve? What can I do? How can I help in the world? And that seems to me to just be a better narrative to let our kids understand the world around them and how they can contribute. And I say all of this to say, if we weren't so focused on what people say we should be or we think ourselves we should be, maybe that leaves a little more room to think of the world differently. Instead of thinking of ourselves, thinking of how we can help others, how we should help others, how we could serve others. I don't know, maybe that would change a few hearts, maybe a few minds. Again, I don't know anything. I do know I so appreciate you listening to Everything's Messy podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode. I'm excited for my new adventure. My new podcast drops next Tuesday, Truth and Pink. I do hope that you'll pop on over there and see what you think of that. And I can't wait to get messy with you guys again. See you later. Thanks for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Whew, if you made it this far, give yourself a gold star or at least a nap. Honestly, if you showed up today and you were listening, you've already crushed it. I'm so grateful for you listening. If anything hit home, share it, tag me, write it on a sticky note. I don't care. Just don't keep all of this messy goodness to yourself. You can find me on Instagram at Everything's Messy Wellness or over at my website, everythingsmessywellness.com, where I've got resources, coaching, and probably a new rant about blood sugar or something that's just nonsense. It's all waiting for you. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got all of my podcast episodes up there. And I'm on X at Everything's Mess. Or if you just want to send me an email, Sarah at everythingsmessywellness.com. Look, until next time, hydrate, take no crap, and as always, keep it messy.